Please give Helen a round of applause as well.
So hi, I'm Helen, and I'm here today to talk to you about the dangers of digital exclusion. I had an intro slide, but we've done this. UX consultant, user researcher. I've been working as a user researcher since the start of this year, and I'm working with the DVSA, so I'm working with a government department. Also occasionally a speaker and an event organizer as well, so I co-organise Women in Tech Nottingham and UX Knots. So you'll see from this talk that inclusion is a thing that's really important to me across different branches of my professional life. So I've been thinking recently about bubbles. So not the fun party kind of bubbles, but filter bubbles. Now, the danger with filter bubbles is that you're thinking that you're getting a representative view of the world, and you're really, really not. And you don't know it. And I think this is what we're in. We're in our tech filter bubble, and it's really hard to pop it, and it's really hard to see what's on the other side of it. And when we're in our bubble, we build things based on our own biases, on assumptions, on untested business models, sometimes maybe just on wishful thinking. And a lot of us within tech are working in Agile as well, and Agile has some great things about it, but the problem that it has is sometimes it moves so fast that we just need to build something, we just need to ship something. But when we do this, we can put the cart before the horse. And we can end up building things which are, A, not only in danger of not really working for the intended audience that we have, but B, actively excluding them. So let's have a look at what digital exclusion actually looks like. So as of this year, 2018, 8.2% of UK adults have never used the internet. There are 4.3 million people in the UK with 0 basic digital skills. So that's a relatively big number. And I want you to kind of think about that. And I'm going to make an assumption about what your assumption is of these people. And I'm going to assume that you think that they look like this. Like, it must just be old people, right, that don't use the internet. They are the majority. 76% are retired and over the age of 65. But 20% are between 45 and 64. And then we have 4% under the age of 45. So we have a quarter of these people within working age. So when these people were surveyed, regardless of age, they were asked what would get them to go online. And 78% of these people said nothing. There was no inclination that they had, nothing that would persuade them to go online. But this leaves us with a problem because tech moves forward at such a massive pace, and we're digitizing loads of products, loads of services. Are we going to get to a point where we leave these people behind? So that was the 4.3 who have 0 digital skills. We've got a kind of spectrum where there's this baseline of five criteria to be fully digitally skilled. So between 0 to 4, we have 11.3 million people in the UK who are not counted as having a full basic digital skill set. And that's 21% of the UK. And then we have everyone else. So I keep talking about basic digital skills. So what are these? They are things like being able to use a search engine, send an email, buy something online, buy an app, download it to your phone, filling in an application form. I mean, a lot of us would say that we have full digital skills and we still struggle on these all of the time. That's bad UX a lot of the time. And being able to verify a source of information found online. This is the one that worries me the most because we've got all the fake news stuff and people cannot assess things and know that it's a proper source of information or not. So a lot of these things, like when I first looked at this list, I was like, wow, when it says basic, this is really basic. This is stuff that for most people in the room, we just know how to do this. It's just natural and intuitive to us. And that's because we live in this bubble of digital privilege. And there are a load of people who live outside of our bubble for different reasons. They might be demographic or economic, psychological, whatever the reasons are. when they're outside of our privileged bubble, they are excluded from us. So we're going to look at how we can be more inclusive. So every decision we make can raise or lower barriers to participation in society. It is our collective responsibility to lower these barriers through inclusive products, services, environments, and experiences. So this is a quote from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Manual. If you are not familiar with inclusive design, this is a really, really great resource to start having a look through. It's not very long, and it's really well laid out, and it gives you that overview of what it means to be inclusive within design. And one of the things that they do so well is something called the persona spectrum. So when we talk about inclusivity, we talk about accessibility as going hand in hand with that, and when we talk about accessibility, we talk about disability. And what the spectrum does is it highlights that it isn't, when we're looking at accessible and inclusive, it isn't just disabilities. There are lots of situations where, regardless of who we are, we might be affected by using technology. So if we take this as an example, somebody might be nonverbal as a disability, but they might have laryngitis or tonsillitis, they might have lost their voice, or they might have a heavy accent. Regardless of what type of person they are, if they're trying to use voice UI, they're not going to be able to use it. And when we look at this as a more inclusive group of people, it starts to show us how actually when we design things, it is for a much broader audience than we might initially think. And it's a really good way to foster empathy as well. So if you're having these conversations as a team, it starts to be like, oh, I could be that person. And they have a variety of different examples, from speech to hearing. The bartender one is a good example. You might have perfect hearing, but you're in a noisy bar. You're going to be affected by voice technology again. So these are great tools, and I really, really advocate being able to get together and have these conversations. But one of the things that I found working within technology is just this massive disconnect between the people in tech and the people that we're designing for. So we tend to work in our kind of shiny tech offices. We've got latest equipment, retina screen laptops, tablets, phones, latest software, browsers, beanbags, ping pong, beer fridge. It's so cool working tech, right? So this is our setup, and we work in our lovely shiny offices. But we can't design effective products and services for people without stepping away and stepping outside of these buildings, because our toolkit is not the same as our users. So we might work like this, but as I said before, so I'm working with the DVSA as a user researcher, and I work with MOT mechanics. They are the people who use our service. Their equipment looks a little different. So they don't have the latest computers. They have oily rags next to the printers, just a screwdriver thrown there. And this computer of a visit that I went to is literally in a shed in a garage. This is their computer setup. It is a world away from this. It's a world away from our shiny, shiny, lovely tech. And in tech as well, we want our personas to look like this, happy people using computers in lovely lit offices, I don't know what product he's using, but he's having a lovely time. We do all this happy persona kind of stuff. But that's not what the people using my service look like. This is someone who uses my service. And there is no computer in this photo. There is no computer in the MOT bay that he works in. So he has to walk through another workshop into reception, hope that no one's using the computer. If they are, wait. Let them finish, log on, do some things, log off, walk back, walk through, do some more work. And it's only by going out and meeting these people that we see this, because if we just design this in our shiny, shiny office, we just assume that someone's going to be using the computer in real time. It's well, they're not. But we only get this when we see outside. This is another mechanic that one of my colleagues went to visit, and he identified as being severely dyslexic. And one of the great things about user research and going out and speaking to people is that we discover user needs. And he said, I would absolutely love it for our service to talk to him. His level of dyslexia was so severe that he said it's killing to write. It literally hurts. So the ability for him to be able to actually have our service read to him, he said, would just change everything. So my colleague installed a Google text-to-speech extension. So this mechanic had said he was gadget mad, and he identified as being very, very high on the digital literary scale, but he didn't know about Chrome extensions. So this was installed for him, and he said, that's life-changing. It's really powerful what we can do, and the power that we have within tech. And for my colleague, he was like, well, just install this, it will help. But going and doing this research as well, we're building this into our service now. So we are actually starting to implement text-to-speech because we know that dyslexia is a really, really common and strong problem with our users. But again, we have to talk to people to find this out. So I want to end just on looking at responsibility as well. So how do we ensure that we use technology ethically in support of what is good and minimize harmful outcomes? In other words, how to not regret the things we will build. This is an amazing resource that was also highlighted by my colleague called the Ethical OS Toolkit. There are 8 risk zones, but I'm going to just look really quickly at the economic and asset inequality section, because that's the one that ties best in with digital exclusion. And this toolkit is basically a list of questions to get together as your team and just think about before you put pen to paper, before you write a line of code. And they include things like, who will have access to this technology and who won't? So in other words, are we creating a digital divide? Will people or communities who don't have access to this technology suffer a setback in comparison to those who do? And if so, what does this setback look like? What differences are there going to be between the haves and the have-nots of this technology? We have to think about the long-term futures that our technologies are helping to create. If we fail to do this, we fail everyone who uses these technologies. I don't want to get to a point in 5, 10, 20 years' time where we're starting to regret the things that we built because we didn't do enough research, we didn't find out enough about the people that we're trying to work for, and because we didn't step outside of our bubble and actively find the people that we need to work for and need to build things for. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to have Jeff saying this to us about technology. Thank you. It's me.
Thank you so much. And for visually breaking that down for us into the different profiles as well. I was completely unaware of most of that. So thank you. A couple of quick questions from me before I sort of bring the panel in. The bit that resonated for me early on was the sheer number of people that aren't able to go on the internet to fact check what they're reading in, say, a tabloid. Mm-hmm. And that number might be, I think, 4.2 million.
Yes, well, that was with 0 skills. So the way that it would work is, if we're looking at that in terms of people who might not fit that skill set, it's potentially more than the 4.3 million people. Yeah. I don't have the exact breakdown.
Yeah.
But
so we know that that's potentially a referendum-changing number.
Yes.
In the wake in the wake of Cambridge Analytica, are you being approached by people that want to sort of take the opposite view on this and build in more to reach those demographics, that part of the electorate? Is there an opportunity for that in the sorts of services you provide?
Yes. Well, yeah. So because I'm working for one of the government organisations, I'm working with GDS. And GDS have a lot of research into what they call the digital inclusion scale. So we have this thing where we are trying to digitize lots and lots of products, but GDS always have always provide a fallback. So for the government organizations, because we know that there are millions of people, age is regardless for government, not for mine necessarily, but when you're looking at Home Office and things, like everyone in the country applies to that. So they always have a fallback that you must provide something, like whether it's phone or letters, some sort of access. But that's within government and not necessarily within private organisations.
Right.
So the danger that I can see going forward is that, well, GDS has kind of covered this as a responsibility that they need to do, but private companies don't necessarily have that same mandate to do that.
Right.
And this is where, like, if a company wants to be completely digital, they can.
Yep.
And there's no fallback from that.
So the onus is on the company commissioning the app or commissioning whatever it is to build this in. There's no obligation for them to.
No, not really. And there's an assumption that everyone wants to be digital, but not everyone does.
Yep.
And there's a statement which I think is more on the inclusion, which is the never have, never wills.
Yeah.
Like,
and I love that as well, because I know that those people in my family, I can see they're like this. Don't show me it. I'm not going to do it. And I love the example of the mechanic who really wanted to be included, and then there are ways to include him. But what can we do for those people that are technophobic, sworn against it? This is not for me. How can we reach those people? Are there back channels? Are there more human connections that we can explore?
Potentially. I mean, I was actually talking to you about this. So as a bigger kind of strategy, I'm not really sure on that. I went out last week to demonstrate a tablet to some of our mechanics, and with the idea being that we know that the computer is 2 rooms away, and if we could introduce a tablet, they could use it when they're actually looking at a car. And I handed this guy a tablet, and he nearly recoiled. Like, he didn't want to take it off me. Yeah. And he was like, no, I'm old school. Like, oh, there's no way this is going to work. But then we went through it was a bit of usability testing. And by the end of it, he was like, yeah, I'd use this. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
But that's only kind of like going out, speaking to people. It's not like this massive strategic thing. Maybe if there's more researchers going out doing more things, maybe we can sway things a little bit. But
so it's fear talking, and a lot of the time, if people can find a route to actually get comfortable with it, then maybe they're not technophobic, and this is not for me. Yeah,
and in fact, the nothing category, the next one down was a lack of confidence.
Right.
So some of it is that people they would like to, but the confidence level is so low, they don't know how to there's like that barrier to entry as well.
Thank you. Has anybody on the panel experienced firsthand the discovery of an area of their audience that was previously excluded that they've had to then work out how to accommodate? Have you realised that your message or your work isn't reaching somebody and then tried to think, well, how can I reach that person?
Just briefly, I think listening to this and being thoughtful about being more inclusive is such a key thing, I think, for everybody to try and wrestle with at the moment. It's just a fact, I'm not bragging, but I've been doing this, like, designing stuff for people digitally for nearly 20 years, and I'm frankly embarrassed and ashamed at how many times I have been in the shiny office with the shiny computers, and we know better than anybody else. So we know what we're doing, we're professionals, we'll design it, you will use it, and it will be fine. And I think there's a very large myth, certainly through like the 2000s, there was a myth that we were all doing user testing, or that we were all actually doing field work and really out there. And I and many other people, I think, were guilty of saying we were doing it, when really we would say that the budget wasn't there for it, or we weren't being proactive about doing it on a very, very low budget way ourselves. Yeah. There was a lot of arrogance about what we built, and I think we still see it today with social media and Facebook in particular, and those kind of very arrogant big tech companies that I think take those kind of users for granted, right? Mm.
It's about self-discipline and maybe asserting the importance of this to the client in as many situations as we can.
Business benefits is usually, if you can talk in business benefits, maybe you can get a conversation going. I used to find anyway.
Yeah, it is always it's the harder sell, which is a shame because it's where the most value lies.
Yeah. But there's a lot to be bragged about and celebrated if you go that route and do that kind of work. Yeah. It's really good for your business. You can talk about it.
Yeah.
But people are a bit like,
and when you find things out, like, that's life-changing. Like, we go and we get these amazing quotes from people that otherwise it's like, well, we just make the service, hopefully it's fine. Like, going and getting that validation is really great as well.
Helen, thank you very much. Thank you.
you.